My family sold me to a 51-year-old man when I was 15. I ran away from home. We were supposed to celebrate our third anniversary. He had made the reservation a week in advance. Even insisted I wear the red dress he once said made me look like a walking Valentine. I remember feeling flattered. Nervous, even. I did my makeup carefully, curled my hair. I wanted to look perfect for him. The restaurant was upscale, dim lighting, the kind of place where waiters whisper and glasses clink like secrets. He looked good, confident, clean-shaven, wearing that black jacket I bought him last Christmas. His friends were already at the table. That was the first red flag. He hadn't mentioned they'd be joining us. 3 of them, 2 guys and a girl, all dressed like they were ready to judge a fashion show. They didn't even stand up when I arrived. Just glanced. Smirked. I sat next to him quietly. He didn't introduce me. Just continued talking to them like I wasn't there. When the waiter came, he ordered for everyone but me. "She'll just have a salad," he said, not even looking my way. I opened my mouth to protest, but he gave me that look. The one that says asterisk, don't start. Asterisk. So I didn't. The evening dragged on. His friends made jokes I didn't understand, laughed at things I wasn't part of. He laughed too loud, exaggerated, leaning toward the other girl more than necessary. I sat in silence, sipping water, trying to keep my smile polite. Then came the moment. One of his friends made a comment, something about dating down or charity relationships. Everyone laughed. And then he said it. Loud. Clear. Like he wanted everyone to hear. A girl like her should be grateful I even dated her. Laughter. From the table. From the next table. And I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because I knew something they didn't. He turned to me, that smug grin spreading across his face. "We're done," he said. "You can take care of the bill, yeah?" And he stood up, walked out. I watched him leave without a single glance back. His friend still chuckled behind me, already calling for the check, like I was nothing but a background character in their night. I stayed, calm, silent. When the waiter returned, I paid. With his card, the one he accidentally left in my coat pocket 2 days ago after borrowing it for an online subscription. I tipped generously. Then I stood up and walked past his friends. Not a word, not a glance, just a smile that said, asterisk, you'll see. Asterisk. The next morning, my phone exploded. 38 missed calls, voicemails, texts, DMs, all from him. I didn't answer. Instead, I poured myself coffee, turned on the speaker, and played the first message. "Hey, listen, it was just a joke, okay? I didn't mean it like that. I was drunk. Next one. Where are you? Seriously, this isn't funny. You used my card. What the hell? Another. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Everyone's laughing at me now. Just call me." I smiled again, because finally he was the one left sitting in silence. Every Friday, I carried dishes on a tray. Hot flatbread, lamb rice, spicy sauces. The men in our family sat on rugs, talking loudly, snapping their fingers, call the next one. I would pass, bow, and put the food in front of them, trying not to meet their eyes. If someone was unhappy, my father called me in the night and lectured me at length about being the face of the family. If I argued, I was beaten. These weren't rare outbursts of anger. It was an order. Sometimes he'd just scowl, snatch the belt off the rack, and whisper, "You should be grateful. As ugly as you are, your lucky ham-out is interested in you." Mom looked at the floor. Then she smeared bleaching cream on my face to look decent for the wedding. I sat with that burning on my skin, clenched my teeth, wishing my face would just wipe off. My teenage sister, Huda, once asked my mom, "Why do we smear her and not me?" Mom quietly replied, "She will be taken away first. She mustn't embarrass us." I didn't eat enough. On purpose. I memorized it by heart. The later your period starts, the later the wedding. I looked it up in an old book at my grandfather's house. I talked myself into it. If I didn't become a woman, they couldn't give me away. I prayed that my body would remain childlike. I was 14, and I was trapped in a trap that no one but me could see. There was no talk of feelings in our family. Only duty. You're a girl, so you're destined to be a wife, a mother, a servant. First to your parents, then to your husband, then to your sons. The words dream, future, education sounded like blasphemy. When I once smuggled a pamphlet on women's rights into the house, my father found it under my pillow. He said it was filth from the West. He burned it in front of me and then made me sleep on the floor for a week. From then on, I learned to memorize numbers, phone numbers, articles from the Constitution, all in my head, all to use one day. I created my own army. It sounds pathetic, but that's how I felt. I would gather my younger cousins, Ani, Margie, Sabia, and tell them stories about how girls in other countries go to school, how they can choose, how they laugh without fear. Can we have one? Ani whispered. Not yet, I answered, but we'll be ready. I wrote in my notebook, marriage before the age of 18 is illegal. If threatened, call the number. I made copies, hid them in cookie boxes, sewed them into my clothes. I knew the risks were enormous, but I felt that if I didn't, no one would. It was at this time that my father started talking about my destiny approaching. Soon, he said. Soon enough, my girl. We've made a deal. You will have a powerful husband. I didn't cry. I was numb. I remembered when Hamad Habibi came to our house for lunch last week. He looked at me like a commodity. He didn't ask, didn't smile, just nodded to his father. In a couple of months, when the blood comes in, we'll start training. I almost dropped the kettle. Mom stroked my shoulder and whispered, You'll be safe. I realized that's what they really wanted. Not for me, for themselves. That night I opened the window, climbed out on the roof, and looked up at the sky. I could feel the world below buzzing, preparing my cage. But I knew I had the power to remember, the power to teach others, the power to speak the truth when the time came. I didn't know exactly how it would end, but I swore to myself I wouldn't marry him. I won't become what they make me, even if I'm alone, even if my own blood betrayed me. Your sons. I was 15 when I noticed the first stains on the sheets. I froze as if someone had punched me in the stomach. It wasn't painful. It was scary. I stared at the scarlet, as if it were a judgment. Everything I'd feared had begun. Everything I was trying to avoid had come. I hid the sheet in the closet, washed myself with soap and water, rubbed until it was red, hoping to erase the time. But it bled again. And then I cried. Not out of pain, out of powerlessness. They found out 2 days later. Mom walked into the bathroom, noticed the stained cloth, and gasped. Half an hour later, all the women of the family were in the house. You have become a woman, Auntie whispered. Now you can be a bride. Now you are a pride, Grandma said, squeezing my shoulders tightly. And I kept silent, because I knew that everything that would happen next would not be about me. It would be about them. My father had arranged a dinner. Guests, sweets, cardamom tea. I sat with my head down, in a long dress, covered head to toe like a doll in a shop window. Hamad Habibi came again. Slim, gray-haired, wearing an expensive suit and a ring on his pinky finger. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked at me, like he was checking out the merchandise. He said the wedding could be next month. He agreed to a transition period. He said, let him get used to my last name. I was standing there as if in a dream. I heard someone calling my name. Someone saying congratulations. My mom stroking my shoulder and saying, that's lucky. It could have been worse. That night, I found out that my cousin Anya had gotten her period, too. She was 13. She came to me in the dark, trembling like a leaf. Is he coming for me too? I nodded. And if I don't want to? She asked. I opened the notebook I'd kept all this time. It was filled with phone numbers of shelters, pieces of legislation, addresses. Everything I'd been able to gather over the last 2 years. I gave it to Anna. Memorize these numbers. Remember that you have the right to say no. She looked at me wide-eyed. Then she clutched the notebook to her chest like she was holding a sword. A week later, Ani was to be engaged to our uncle's 51-year-old neighbor. He was a widower, had 3 children, and needed a young wife to take care of the house. I knew, if I didn't make a move now, everything I had taught myself and others would be for nothing. Ani left in the morning. She said she was going to the dressmaker. For hours later, the social services came. It happened in the middle of the afternoon prayers. The door opened abruptly, too abruptly for it to be a neighbor. In front stood a woman in a strict jacket. Next to her, a man with a folder in his hands and a police officer. All three looked serious, without smiling. "We received an anonymous report," the woman said, "that an underage girl is being forced to marry a man over 50 in this house." The hall became as silent as a grave. The father rose from the carpet. His voice was calm, but his face was tense. "Dear, who told you such nonsense? All the girls here are happy. We are a respectable family. We are obliged to make an inspection," intervened the man with the folder. "We were told that the girl is only 13 years old. We have to make sure she is not being forced." "That's a lie," the aunt intervened. "She's an adult. It's all the work of ill-wishers. Someone wants to destroy our honor." "Where is Annie?" the woman asked. "She's at the dressmaker's. She's making a dress for a religious festival," answered my mother. I noticed her fingers were trembling. "Do you have any pictures? School papers? Anything to prove her age?" the social worker asked. "Of course, just." The father hesitated. "Now we'll find them." They began to fuss. The uncles were looking at each other. Someone was trying to call Anya. Someone was nervously looking for documents. But the social services had already figured it out. The woman looked around the room and stopped at me. "Are you Theodora?" I nodded, clenching my teeth. "Can we talk to you alone?" My father stepped forward. "She's a minor. You have no right." "We have a law," she replied, "and the right to protect children if there is a threat. We have permission to inspect and temporarily question. We have our own culture," exploded one of the uncles. "The law is the same for everyone," she replied stiffly. I was taken to the kitchen. She sat down across from me and said quietly, "We know you're hiding something. You don't have to put up with it. You have a right to be safe. Just tell me one thing. Are you in danger?" I stared at her, feeling the sweat running down my back. My head was buzzing. There were voices in the room beyond the wall. Loud. Angry. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to yell. But I didn't. Because I knew if I did, they'd kill me. And then, I just nodded. After a brief conversation in the kitchen, the woman worker walked back out into the hall. Her face was still calm, but her gaze was sharper than a knife. "We're done for the day," she said in an official tone. "But we'll keep in touch. And we'll probably come back with a protection order." "On what grounds?" The father almost shouted. "On the basis of risk of forced marriage of a minor," she said calmly. "We've gotten a statement. We are not obliged to reveal the source, but we will be monitoring it shortly." "This is outrageous," said one of the uncles. "Who gave you the right to interfere in our family affairs?" "The girl is not someone's property," the social worker added, closing the folder. "She is a citizen, and she has rights." The policeman stepped forward, signaling that it was better to stop the argument. "We'll be in touch," the woman repeated. "I hope you'll think it over." They turned and left. The door slammed deafeningly, as if leaving behind a vacuum of tension rather than air. As soon as they were out, the house exploded. Dad started screaming, blaming everyone. Somebody blabbed. "Someone betrayed us. It's your fault, Theodora." Mother shouted with her fists clenched. "You taught Anya, didn't you? You put her up to it." I stood silent, but I was shaking inside. I knew. They weren't just suspicious anymore. They were sure. My father took out my notebook. I hadn't noticed it was left open on the bed and held it up to the lighter. "You betrayed us," he hissed. "You're not my daughter." And it burned. My notebook. My knowledge. My 2 years of struggle. He announced, "The wedding is tomorrow. Everything is ready. We're not going to wait for that bitch to run away." Mom sat in the corner and didn't look up. And I looked at the smoldering pages. And I realized I didn't have any more time. I waited until nightfall. I locked myself in the bathroom, turned the lock, and opened the small window that led into the narrow passage between the houses. Jumped down 6 feet. My ankle twisted but didn't break. I bit my lip to keep from screaming. And I ran. Through the yard. Past the sleeping neighbor. Through open wickets. I ran like my whole life was burning behind me. I was rushing like hell itself was breathing behind me. My ankle was burning, my body shaking from the adrenaline rush, but I didn't stop. I had no right. Those houses where I'd once been treated to scones and tea were now a danger. Uncles could be sitting there, or neighbors who knew my parents and had once said, "You'll grow up to be a real wife." I hid between cars, waiting to cross the street. I almost got caught once. A man I knew was standing around the corner, munching on something. He didn't see me, and I ducked into a back alley, my heart pounding right in my throat. I needed a place. Any place safe. A bus stop. I reached it after 45 agonizing minutes, on shaky legs, with my breathing confused. My head was pounding. Don't stop. Don't turn around. Don't breathe loudly. The stop was empty. I knew I was taking a risk. What if my father was already calling people he knew? But my legs were no longer holding me up. When the bus pulled up, I stepped inside, and I realized there was no money. I clasped my hands to my chest, looked around. I was about to get off, and suddenly there was a woman. A gray-haired woman in a blue cardigan. She sighed and handed me a tenner. "Run along, child." I didn't look at her. On the bus, I closed my eyes. I was wobbly, but I held on. I repeated in my mind the address of the orphanage I had learned with the others. The one on the brochure I'd given Anya. I didn't know if I'd be accepted, but there were no other options. In the center of town, I jumped off, catching the handrail so hard my fingers turned white. It was noisy, too bright, too free. It was intimidating. I walked down the street as if in a foreign world. Everything seemed unreal. The loud conversations, the shop windows, the smell of coffee. No one knew I had fear simmering in my head. And then I saw the courthouse. I remembered the pamphlet saying, "If you are threatened with a forced marriage, you can ask for protection through an emergency injunction." My body was already on its way there while my mind lagged behind. The receptionist was an older woman with a tired look. She raised an eyebrow when she saw my disheveled clothes, my torn sleeve, my soiled face. But she didn't kick me out. "I need a protective order," I breathed out. She nodded slowly, pointing to a chair. "Sit down. Tell me everything, from the beginning." I was shaking, but I talked. How I learned about the rules. How I tried to stop puberty. The wedding, Hamad Habibi, the escape. She didn't interrupt once, just nodded and typed. Sometimes she sighed. "Do you have an address where you can stay?" I gave the address of a shelter from memory. Inside, I pleaded. I wish it existed. I wish they'd let me in. 10 minutes later, I was ushered into the courtroom. The judge was a man with a serious face, a restrained voice. I repeated everything again. He looked at me carefully. Sometimes he shook his head. "You say you're 15? "Yes," I whispered. "And my father had arranged a marriage to a man twice your age." 3. There was silence. Then he spoke. "In view of the very real threat of a forced marriage, I am issuing an emergency injunction. A full hearing will be scheduled in 2 weeks. Until then, you are forbidden to approach the minor. Her temporary whereabouts will remain confidential." I could hear my heart thundering in my ears. I couldn't believe it. But it was the first step. The first defense. I walked outside with the document in my hands when my phone rang. A voicemail. Then another. Then another. I knew it wasn't requests. Not concern. It was rage. Shame. Threats. I turned off the phone and lowered my head. Alone. With a piece of paper. In a city where everything was unfamiliar. But I was alive. And for the first time in a long time, on my own. Nodded. And sat down. I walked out of court with a piece of paper that seemed like armor. But I was still alone. I needed shelter. Someplace to hide. Someone to confide in. I went to the juvenile detention center. There was a woman there named Rachel. She looked at the list and shook her head. "All the slots are taken, honey. There have been 3 emergencies across the city today." "But I can't go home," I whispered. They'd already burned my diary. The wedding was supposed to be today. "I understand. Just give me some time." I sat in the corner while she talked on the phone. I looked out the window. I could see the rain coming down. It was falling on the glass like it was trying to hide me. I pulled an old piece of paper out of my backpack. Address. Name Ms. Rodriguez. The teacher who had once told me, "If anything happens, come see me." I dialed the number. 3 long beeps. Then her voice. I burst into tears. An hour later, I stood at her door. She opened it without asking a word, just hugged me. She had soft hands and a warm look in her eyes. Like someone who doesn't want to know everything so you don't get scared, but knows the main thing is that you're in trouble. Go on, she said. It's all right. I'm not giving you up. I told her everything. About Hamaud, about the notebook, about Ani, about social services. She didn't say anything. Then she looked at my ankle, got some ice, and we made a plan. We'll go to child services, but they need proof. Can you show them? I pulled up my sleeve. The belt scar was fresh. Is that enough? It's the truth, she said. The next morning the doorbell rang. Ms. Rodriguez had a glass door, and we saw them before she opened it. 3 men. One in a gray suit, one with a mustache, one in a leather jacket. Father, an uncle, and someone else. We're here for our daughter, the father said. Ms. Rodriguez didn't open fully, only spoke through the lock. She's in protective custody. She has a prescription. This is a misunderstanding. My daughter is sick. She needs to be treated. Her mind. You need to leave the area. Now. The police are on their way. He was cursing, screaming that I was a traitor, that I'd ruin my family's honor, that he'd find me even in hell. I was trembling, but I didn't go into the room. I stayed behind Ms. Rodriguez, because I'm not alone. When they left, I showed her everything. My diary, which still had the imprints of the burned pages, my essays from school describing my fear of growing up, my fear of getting married. We made copies. She called a lawyer. She called the shelters, contacted the emergency placement coordinator. And then, toward evening, a woman in a severe coat arrived. Margaret, I'll help you, she said. You're doing great, Theodora. She had a list, a map of the city, and the look of someone who had saved people like me before. We left for the hospital where I was examined. Confirmed abrasions, bruises, and the same old scar on my thigh that I'd always hidden. Margaret looked the doctors in the eye and nodded, as if each bruise was another brick in the wall of my defense. But there were still no seats. Do you have someone to take you in for the night? I wondered. Then I remembered. Theodora Whitman. I saw her name on a list of volunteers. She worked with girls who'd been abused. We'll check it out. 2 hours later, we were at her door. Theodora opened it, looked at me, and let me in. I've been waiting for her for a long time, she said. Come in, child. She had a safe house. Cameras, sensors, alarms. But most importantly, it was quiet. No shouting, no threats, just a clean bed and warm light. I sat up on the bed, snuggled into the pillow, and whispered, Thank you. Theodora nodded. Rest. Tomorrow we'll start a new journey. Theodora? Theodora Whitman's life was different. As quiet as the rustling leaves outside her window. Predictable. No yelling, no commands, no humiliating orders. For the first time in years, I woke up to the sound of my alarm clock instead of my mother's yell. I ate breakfast at the table, not on the run, feeling the taste of food, not its meaning. But the silence was unusual. I found myself waiting for a scream, a blow, a threat. It was as if my body didn't believe the pain was gone. And it still froze when there was a knock at the door. It still trembled when the phone rang. I didn't even trust the silence. Theodora was strict but kind. She explained every action she took, asking permission even before simply adjusting a cushion on the couch. I wasn't used to that. No one had ever asked what I wanted you to do before. You're safe here, she said. But if you don't believe it, the protection won't work. I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I didn't know how to yet. Patricia, the lawyer, came again 2 days later. We have grounds to get an indefinite protective order, she said. But we'll need a medical report, as well as photographs to prove the beatings and the attempted forced marriage. I nodded. Theodora had already taken pictures of my bruises and scars. We gathered documents, medical certificates, my essays, and an old notebook rescued in scan form from Anya. It all became a case. But the threat didn't go away. My aunt, my father's younger sister, tried to contact Theodora. She brought food, gifts, stood at the gate for hours, said family is forever, said the father just couldn't cope, that the mother cried nights. I'd stand behind the curtain and stare at her, stone-faced. Theodora always answered the same thing. The girl doesn't want to talk. Respect her decision. The third time, the aunt didn't come alone. She had a man with her, the family's lawyer. He talked about cultural differences, about the right of parents to raise their children in their own way. He said that poaching a child is a criminal offense. We're dealing with it within the law, Patricia replied firmly. We have medical reports, depositions, records, and the court is on our side. The side of delusion, he said as he walked away. And then they came for me again. I was coming home from school that day, alone for the first time. The psychologist said I was ready. I reached the parking lot and froze. There was a car parked outside the house. A white truck, old with tinted windows. Inside, a figure. A man. I recognized it immediately. It was my uncle. He got out, slowly, like in a bad dream. He came closer. I pressed myself into the school fence, clutching my backpack. We mean no harm, he said. You know we don't. This whole thing is just a stupid misunderstanding. Go away, I breathed out. The police are coming. Do you think they'll always be around? His voice got lower. You know family is forever. I pulled out my phone. I turned on the camera. I got his face, license plate number, his voice. He backed off, got back in the truck and drove off. I stood there until the school security guard came up. I didn't cry, just breathing. Barely. Theodora had beefed up security. Cameras, sensors, video recorder at the entrance, even an emergency button on her cell phone. I knew I was trusted, that I was being protected, but I still flinched at the sound of my messenger. One day, I got a text from my mom. You don't know what you're doing. Dad is sick. He's not eating. He's crying. Do you want him dead? I didn't answer. The next day, flowers, a huge bouquet with a note. You'll always be our daughter. We'll forgive you if you come back. I stood on the doorstep with the bouquet. It smelled like lilies, but I thought it smelled like blood. I threw it in the trash. Patricia started preparing the trial materials. I testified. I signed documents. I recounted everything from memory, even the worst parts. The words were hard to say, but every time I said them, I felt a little better. Theodora looked at me and said, You're stronger than you think. And I thought of Ani, Fatima. I thought of myself, the one who hid the notebook under my pillow and thought I was alone. Now I knew I wasn't alone, and I won't give up. The trial was held in a windowless hall. I sat with Patricia, waiting for the judge to come out of the deliberation room. My heart was pounding in my throat. I was wearing a simple suit, no makeup, no jewelry. I wanted to look honest, real. On the opposite side was my father, sitting like a block of stone, in a gray suit, my mother next to him with a scarf on her head and dead eyes. Behind them a lawyer, young, cocky, with a shiny briefcase and forward phrases. Don't look at them, Patricia said. Look at me, and remember the truth is on your side. I nodded. The judge entered. Court is now in session. The first speaker was my father's attorney. He started with respectful family, traditional values, and misunderstanding of the situation. Claimed I was temporarily off track and influenced by people who don't understand our culture. She is a teenager, he said, turning to the judge, exposed to emotion. She has been frightened. She's been dragged into someone else's fight. It's a misunderstanding. The family is always willing to take her back. No punishment. No hard feelings. I felt a chill run down my spine. He made it sound like I was a thing. A little broken robot that needed fixing. Patricia stepped to the center of the room and opened a folder. I'm not going to talk about culture. I'm going to talk about facts. And she began to read out the documents. Medical reports, bruises, burns, chronic exhaustion. Social services records, reports of visit, pressure attempts, threatening comments. Psychologist statement, signs of PTSD, anxiety, deprivation. Photos, scars, bruises, threatening letters, video from the school parking lot. The judge was silent, flipped through the files, raised his eyebrows, and then Patricia said, Your Honor, I'd like to call the witness. And Fatima Habibi entered the courtroom. She walked slowly, wearing a long skirt and a light-colored shirt, a look of determination on her face. My name is Fatima. I was Hamad Habibi's first wife. All heads turned. She told her story. No screaming, no tears, just the facts. I was 16. He was over 40. I gave birth every year. I was beaten. I wasn't allowed to study. When I tried to leave, they hid me. One day I escaped through a window, just like she did. And I'm alive. And I'm standing here. Fatima showed me her medical records, photographs, testimonials. Father turned pale. The mother covered her face with her hands. And the judge said, "That's enough." I gave my testimony last. My hands were shaking. My voice was breaking. But I talked about everything. How my father beat me for refusing to smile at a man. How my mother used to put bleach on my face. How I was taught to cook for a husband twice my age. How I hid orphanage numbers under equations in my notebook. I don't hate them, I said at the end. I just want to be free. The judge was silent for a long time. Then he said, "The court decides to issue an indefinite protection order in favor of the applicant. Any contact with her parents, relatives, and their representatives is forbidden. Any attempt at communication will be considered a violation of the law." The father jumped up. "This is a farce. This is a conspiracy against the family. She is a sick woman. She is a prisoner of these women." The policeman came over and sat him back down. Mother didn't say a word. She just looked at me. For the last time. After the meeting, Fatima came up to me. "You are strong," she said. "But the fight is not over yet. They won't back down. They will press through social networks, through lawyers, through seniors. Be prepared." I nodded, and then she hugged me, quietly, without words, with a warmth I'd never known from my real family. The next day, my social media was hacked. Photos distorted. Captions, "Mentally ill, needs help." Videos of clippings from my life, distorted, humiliating. The stores in the neighborhood where I lived with Theodora started refusing service. Neighbors began to squint. Civil suits began for defamation, for moral damages. The family's lawyer filed a request for a competency hearing. I became the enemy to those who once called me pride. But I was no longer alone. I had Theodora, Patricia, Fatima, the girls who found my notebooks. We started putting together a new network, making new copies. Spread the word. I had Theodora, Patricia, Fatima, the girls who found my notebooks. It had been 2 months since the day of the trial. I woke up in silence. No yelling, no threats, no fear. Theodora and I had built a regimen. Morning jogs, coffee, homework. I studied at home, but sometimes went to the local library where no one knew my past. No one knew I was that girl. I no longer wore dark clothes. I no longer hid my face. I saw my reflection again and didn't flinch. But the calm was fragile. In the parking lot in front of the library one day, I saw a van. Inside, a man with a cell phone who was clearly taking pictures. The next day, a postcard in the mailbox without a stamp. It said, "Children are not being rescued. They're returned. See you, Theodora." Patricia said they're preparing a civil suit to forcibly remove the child from the family. Technically, the court had already ruled, but they were looking for a new loophole. Their goal wasn't to get me back. It was to destroy my reputation, my name, make me an example of what a girl from a good family shouldn't do. One day, I got a call from Sarah, my cousin. "You're crazy," she whispered. "You don't realize what you've done." "I've been saved," I replied. "They won't let us go to the mosque now. Mom's being kicked out of her job. You've ruined us all." I didn't answer, because I didn't think of them as us anymore. They chose silence. I chose freedom. Ms. Rodriguez came by this evening with news. "You remember that notebook of yours?" she asked. A girl from school had found one of the rewritten copies. She brought it to me. She's not the only one. There's 5 others with her. We met a week later. All teenagers, 12 to 16. All with their own secrets. Some had a wedding chain on their finger. Some had abrasions on their hands. Some had nothing but scared eyes. And they all said, "We want to know our rights." We started meeting once a week. Theodora rented space in the library. I printed new pamphlets. Patricia explained how to talk to social services. Ms. Rodriguez taught self-esteem classes. We called it the Freedom Network. By the 5th meeting, there were already 20 of us. Some brought sisters. girlfriends. Sometimes just a number written on a piece of paper. She's afraid, but she wants to talk. We created routes, maps of safe houses, passwords for chat rooms, all under the guise of math and literature circles. We were shadows, but we were growing. On Sunday, I got a letter. A real one. On paper. You destroyed my home. You stole my daughter. But worst of all, you made an example of me. And for that, you will be held accountable. No name. No address. Theodora called the police. Margaret from the Emergency Placement Center offered the Witness Protection Program again. I declined. Why? Patricia asked. Because if I disappeared, they would win. A week later, we received 3 more applications from girls from a neighboring county. One left a brochure at a bus stop. Some left it in the gym locker room. Some found it in the library between the pages of Fahrenheit 451. Then Dad's press conference started. He stood outside the courthouse and said to the camera, "My daughter has been zombified. She's a victim. She's sick. We just want to bring her home." Behind him, an imam, a teacher, a lawyer. Everyone said I was a victim of radical feminism, a megalomaniac girl, a manipulative woman. I looked at the screen and felt nothing. They couldn't hurt me anymore.